Hey everybody, it's EK from EK Gorman Designs, and I am sneaking in today with something a little bit different than I normally do. I decided I was going to take the Crafto Clock, my cat friend 6x6 paper pack that I got from White Rose Crafts, in addition to my cat friend Ephemera sheet, which has the punch out die cuts, and create 10 cards using just the papers that I got from the set. I might have gone a little overboard and done a few more than 10. Each of the 6x6 papers is double-sided, and there's two of each pieces, so you have one of each of the designs included in the pack of papers, which is great because then you don't have to decide between which side to use. Here I am showing each of the designs, front and back, so I'm flipping them so that you see them on each side instead of, yes. And as you can see, it's a lovely cat-themed pack of paper, which I'm a cat person. I have a dog, but I'm a cat person. Mainly because I probably am part cat. Nonetheless, I'm separating the papers into things that can be cut into small strips, things that are good background pages, and then things that have large designs that are meant to be done. Here I'm showing the supplies I pulled from my personal stock to use in addition to the Craft Clock papers. I also pulled out some stamp sets that have cat themes that have great sentiments on them, one being the Woodware cat stamp set and the other being Jessica Kittens from Your Next Stamp, both of which I got from White Rose Crafts. Now I'm going to start cutting things up and making sure I utilize the pack of paper as well as humanly possible. I have never done this before. I have never pulled out an entire pack of paper and decided to go to town and create. But I know it's doable, and I end up with lots of little I end up using one or two pieces of paper from a pack of paper and then have all this 6x6 paper laying around my house. So I decided what I would do is make 10 cards from this pack and show you how diverse your cards can be using the pack of paper. What I'm doing right now is trimming up those with good focal images, so that way I can start using the pieces of paper that have great images on it and make sure I don't accidentally misuse it. And then these pieces of paper here that have great banner feels to them, I went ahead and trimmed them, and I separated everything up onto my workspace so I could drive myself nuts. I picked some of the more neutral paper pads here and trimmed them up to be 4 inches by 5¼ inches, so that way I could mat them still and still have plenty of leftovers to play with on another time. Now, I will warn you, I had zero plan when I started this. I just pulled out what I felt like using and went to town. I am not a planner. I am not one of those lovely people who can sit down and have a game plan and just make it happen. Not my thing. I am a fly by the seat of your pants. ADHD is real and I have it, and needless to say, planning. If I were to plan, I wouldn't use it because I would get distracted by butterflies in the room, and yes. So if anybody follows my videos regularly, you'll know I am a score tape addict. I love score tape. However, I am fairly certain nobody enjoys watching me peel score tape. So I went to my big box crafting store and looked at some Tombow tape runners for this video specifically. And I grabbed one and I took it home, and here I am Here I am creating with it. If anybody knows Tombow and knows their color runners, they know the mistake I've made. But I'll hold off for a second and let you discover it in real time with me, because in a moment I realized my fatal error. With each of the cards I made, I tried to come up with a fun layout, and then I pulled sentiments from the 2 stamp sets I additionally pulled and added them. So this one says Your Possum. It's from the Your Next Stamp set. And I did everything in black ink just to keep it simple. I was really, this for me was really about showcasing the paper pack. I am a colorist by heart. I am not normally a let's go paper packing and make lots of great cards kind of gal, layering papers. But in this case, I thought it might be fun to challenge myself. Right here, you have discovered what I've done wrong. This Tombow is for quick adhesive pull-up. Yeah, it's not a permanent adhesive. No, it is a temporary adhesive. And because I was trying not to use score tape, I now found an additional type of adhering medium that I had on hand to adhere all my stuff. I pulled out the Nouveau, I don't know, matte medium. I don't even know what it's called. I use it. It works. I like it. I'm reaching for it so I can tell you the name. The Nouveau, I can't tell you the name because I've worn the label off. Anyway, it's the Nouveau glue. It's good. I like it. It's not my favorite for sequins, but it works great with paper, and all of these cards glued down really nicely. And in fact, I kind of loved it because I had a little wiggle room. When I glued things down, I could wiggle them for just a moment. This card I am making using the bright turquoise. I know this paper pack's really, really muted, but the bright turquoise really popped the cards in a nice way, so I'm not upset I used it. And this is the only sentiment I had from the paper pack, and it was actually the one on the cover sheet, and it's the title of the paper pack, the My Cat Friend paper pack from Craft O'Clock. But I thought it made a really cute sentiment. I will tell you, I didn't sit down and film this over one day, or one sitting. I did this over a series of days while my kids kept getting pulled out of school because of snow. We're going to use that term real loosely. They kept getting pulled out because of quote-unquote snow, but it wasn't enough to be pulling kids out of school. So you're constantly going to see things like my rings getting taken on off or my shirt sleeves changing. It's because I had to film this over a series of days because the number of times that a human being walked into my crafting space and asked for a snack was unexcusable. I would also like to point out that my 3 small human beings are old enough to get their own snacks, but apparently a snack is not quite as tasty unless mom has gotten it for you. Mothers out there across the world, I'm sure, will understand. Here again is where you see me not knowing exactly what I'm doing. You'll watch me play around with papers. If anybody gets like I do and gets very bogged down by like, oh, layering papers is hard and mixing patterns is hard and mixing colors is hard, play with the paper. Because when you play with the paper, you realize that it's not quite as hard as you think it is. And in fact, if you take the time just to experiment, it becomes quite easy. I did do a little bit of stamping here with some of the background small stamps from I think this one's from the Woodware stamp set. Because I thought the background was a little plain and I wanted to spice it up just a smidgen. So I used the black ink and the little tiny stamps to create some fun pattern in the background. And then I used these ephemera sheets that I had punched out that I thought was a nice collection of images to finish the card off. I like the play of the square and the circle. I don't know. So one of the things I find, and I do all the time, is when I have a sentiment that doesn't fit the space I want it to fit, I just block it off and stamp it as if it was meant to be stamped in 2 lines instead of 1. I did a little distressing on this one, mainly because I thought everything was a little clean and neat. So I distressed the edges with a little bit of that black VersaFine ink. Mainly just, the whole goal here was to make 10 cards that really were different. I didn't want to make 100 cards, but 62 of them were exactly the same. Every card here is unique. Every card is individual. Every card was just me grabbing stuff and playing with it until I found a layout that I liked. There's nothing fancy here. I did stick my ink in here and then smudge it on the paw print ephemera sheet, so I smudged a whole lot of ink to make it work. And used my Woodware mount here to pop the kitty up because she's cute. This sentiment here is from the Your Next Step, Your Next Stamp set. And I love the puns on it, the I'm not kidding you. I don't think these cards would have been as effective had I not pulled out the 2 stamp sets with all the sentiments. I think the sentiments are really what made this project work. I will tell you, this piece of paper I was at a real loss what to do with, because it was like, do I cut individually, fussy cut all the cats out and use them all individually, or do I let it be its own piece of background paper. In the end, I decided to let it be its own background paper, and I'm glad I did, because they're really cute little images, and it should be used. It shouldn't be cut up. It shouldn't be separated just because you can. You can use a large graphic piece of paper like this and make it work. And here I kept it really simple. I do wish I'd kind of gone back to all my cards once I finished making them and added sequins to them, added some sparkle and bling. I didn't, mainly because by the time I finished, I was exhausted. I did pull these two papers that are the same pattern but different colors and decided to block them up. And here's where you really get to see how I had no clue what I was doing, because I got them assembled and then didn't know what to do with them. In the end, matting them out with some of the solid colored cardstock and giving them just that slight edge of matte color allowed me to layer them in a way that was effective. If all else fails, pull out some colored cardstock and mat your paper. It allows a printed paper to be muted almost. It doesn't mute it, it allows, it breaks it up. It gives it a border and a boundary that allows you to do more with it. Here I'm using a couple more of the Woodware Mount sticky pads so it pops up just a smidgen. And then adding in some of the ephemera to finish off this particular card. You're going to learn I'm not real smart, because if I was smart, I would have stamped the sentiment before I put tiny little patches of three-dimensional tape under it. But because I'm using the VersaFine, I have a little bit of forgiveness. That's not true with all inks, but that black VersaFine one really does allow me to fix my own errors, for lack of a better word. Here I'm playing with a couple of papers and just trying to layer them in a fun, eye-catching way. I think this particular card would have been much more effective had I matted out each of the printed papers with some of the colored cardstock. But again, no real plan here, just kind of playing. So you get what you get. I am going to encourage you that if you also try to exhaust a pad of paper, that you do pull out some solid colored cardstock. It helps. It helps mat out the card as a whole and gives you a few more options to play with. I have never created cards using a liquid adhesive as the main form of adhesive. But there's something to be said for using a liquid adhesive. It has a little bit of wiggle room on it, which has been really nice, because you notice I often put things off center. And with that liquid adhesive, I've been able to kind of adjust just slightly. Now you'll notice, if you were watching the card count, this is card 11. It's one of those things, I got to 10 cards and went, oh, there's some papers I still want to use. There's some ephemera I still want to use. Let me just make 2 more. So I made 2 more. So there was card 11. Now you get card 12. You can see I'm pulling out some of that olive green cardstock again and matting out the bit of gray paper, gray printed paper, because it just makes everything a little bit more solid. These are a couple scraps that I had gotten from trimming up paper and thought it'd be really fun to set them off center and let them be a bit whimsical and add just a small ephemera. Again, I pulled out a stamp set, this time from the Your Next Stamp, Jessica stamp set, and finished card 12. Again, I'm thinking there's a couple pieces of paper I want to make. So, card 13 it was. This scrap of paper was actually from the cover of the pad of paper, but it's too nice to throw away. Like, it's got all the different papers right there. Use what you've got, make it work. And you can really see that I'm still playing with how to create these cards. I haven't pulled out sketches, I haven't pulled out instructions. I'm just creating off the top of my hand and having fun. I wish I could tell you how long all of these cards took me to make in real time, but because I was working over a series of days while my kids were out from Snowmageddon here, there's no real way of me knowing how long it took, but it didn't take nearly as long as you want to think it did. I was able to, in reality, create these fairly quickly, mainly because there was no coloring involved. And for me, the coloring always takes most. Now, I know I'm not supposed to have favorites, but this piece of paper right here with the Lacy Doyle, it's my favorite from the set. Like, hands down, my favorite from the collection. There's just something, I think, very elegant about this paper. And I thought it was a nice touch with the just simple paws and the simple ephemera sheet added to it to make what is an elegant kitty card. I decided to skip the sentiment altogether on this one because I wanted the paper to speak for itself. I will tell you, as we hit card 15, that the adhesive, I've actually sent a couple of these out since making these cards. The adhesive has held up. The cards aren't fraying or falling apart, which I was kind of afraid it might, but it hasn't. So, if you are in dire need of a adhesive, know that liquid adhesive works. I didn't know that prior to today. I don't know why I don't set more things off center like this and do more layering techniques with things off center, but I really, every time I do it, I love it. There's something that just works with it being set off center like this. Gonna have to do it more often. You can see I keep thinking, I haven't used this paper yet. I wanted to use this paper. Why haven't I used this paper yet? So I kept making cards. I'm really honestly, seriously telling you, I meant to make 10 cards, and it just kind of got into it. Here I pulled out some little footprint stamps and added them to the card because I thought it was a nice, fun, whimsical. I liked the gradiated color on this piece of paper and wanted to make it work. And I think I did with the little paws. At this point, you can't see it, but just off camera is all the scraps of paper that I've had used so far. And they're all just sitting right there for me to play with. So, yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm playing with whatever's left over at this point. I think at this point with card 16, I had 2 6x6 papers I hadn't cut and all kinds of scraps that I had trimmed up from turning a 6x6 piece of paper into a 4x4 or whatnot. I had these little scraps, and yeah, I just kept grabbing them because the paper was working. You know, sometimes you get paper and it just doesn't work. In this case, it really coordinated so nicely that I was happy to play with it. I think it was about this point where I went, okay, I've come this far, I've made this many, I don't have a whole lot left. Let's see if I can use the entire 6x6 pad of paper. So at this point it became a challenge. It was like, okay, how can I finish using up all of this pad of paper and still make fun looking cards? And like I said, at this point I'm really working with scraps. There isn't a whole lot left that's whole. So now it's really becoming, how do I get creative with this? Here are 3 pieces of paper that I had that were trimmed down for one reason or another to make other cards. And they're just too full and whole to not use. So again, with just a little play and some imagination, I'm able to figure out how to continue using each of these pieces of paper. I have lots of these little scraps here, and I wanted to make sure I used them in a fun way. I kind of wish I'd pulled in some green for this to finish this card. This is not maybe my most successful of the let's see how I can use the rest of my papers, but I think several of them are. Now, at this point, I'm going into the 20 marker. This is one of my last pieces of 6x6 paper, and I used it to, obviously, create the background. But again, I'm working with all kinds of fun scraps and making sure I'm wanting to use them. It's funny, I don't often work with gray, and after this experiment, I think I'm going to play around with gray paper more often. Just because it becomes such a... I don't think of gray as being a neutral. I know it is, but I don't think of it that way. But even a printed gray paper becomes a really great neutral. You can see I have 4 pieces of ephemera left. Those are the last 4 of my pictured ephemera pieces, or of all the ephemera pieces, but it's last 4 pieces of pictures I have. So that became the marker. I was like, okay, I will create until I'm out of ephemera. I will use the paper to the best of my ability until I'm out of focal images. And that became the goal. Like, let's finish off the ephemera sheet. And if you remember from the beginning, I took all the nice pictures from the printed paper and trimmed them up and used them first, and then dove into the ephemera pack. I don't know exactly how many visual pieces were on the ephemera pack because I never intended to use them all. But that became, yeah, this is it. What you're looking at is all the pieces of paper I have left, and I know I need to make 3 cards. So it became, what 3 pieces do what paper is the most special to use for these last 3 projects? And when you have kind of scraps, it becomes, how do I carefully choose how to use them? And apparently setting things off center works. I did get glue everywhere here in the end. Because it was like, oh, there's the finish line. I'm so close to being done. And I may have rushed things just a smidgen and got glue everywhere. I won't lie. I was peeling glue off my fingertips for quite a few days. Because again, I'm not used to using a liquid adhesive with my card making. I am a score tape girl through and through. But, so I thought the best way to use up the last of these large pieces that came off of my trimmed 4 by 5 1/4 inch sheets I made was to just layer them down. You'll see in a second that I made a major mistake. Or I guess it's not a mistake. I just didn't like it. I looked at the card and was like, it doesn't work. Now I will say the blue cardstock helped me ground out my ephemera image. But I'm sitting here looking at it going, there just needs to be something more. And I just kept adding and adding and adding. And I guess this is fine. But it wasn't enough. And you can see my frustration here. So I pulled out the Forbes and Friends stamp set from, oh, is it from Forbes? Or did it end up coming from Jessica? I think that's the mouse came from Your Next Stamp. But I stamped all the little micey out. This here is the last card. What was intended to be a 10 card series became 24 cards. But I used the entire pack of paper. Again, I'm not 100% certain this last card worked. But it was the last card, and at this point, creativity went kind of down the toilet. It was like, let's get it done. So I did. I got her done. That right here is all the scraps I had left at the end of the day. So I think this was a pretty excellent use of an entire 6x6 pad paper. To recap all my fun cards, here they are, all 24 of them. I piled them in piles of 5 if you're wondering. If you've made it to this point of the video, thanks for sticking with me. I really appreciate it. I don't normally make videos this long, and if you're still here listening to me, you get some real points. Go ahead and thumbs up this project so I know you want to see more things like this in the future. If you're not already a subscriber, do me a favor, subscribe. And thanks for watching today. I hope you enjoyed it.